Hey, I'm gonna switch the rotors on the disc brake of my bike. This is something that I do very rarely. Thought it would be a kind of interesting video. You're gonna see how it goes. I haven't done this in maybe 4 or 5 years, and the last time I did it, I totally botched it. Anyway, I've got the tool cam going, I've got the coffee cam going, and let's just see how it goes. I think it's gonna be a kind of interesting thing to look at. Cool.
I can't be certain, but I'm hurting myself.
There's the part that I picked up.
It'll get back to my health.
Just like the feeling of a screw loosening off the hub and the feeling of it getting torn to shreds by the screwdriver, they're just way too similar.
This is actually good because it means that the screws have been treated with blue Loctite.
There's some fire left inside. Let my past set on fire. Pump the brakes, start today. Breathe the feeling, ride the wave. Can't erase all the pain. Ride the bleed and throw it away. Pump the brakes. Pump the brakes.
This is the brake caliper taken off the bike, and you can see that it has 2 brake pads in it with blue steel backings and then a black material that actually makes up the pad. What I'm doing here is I'm actuating the arm which pushes the pads together. When it's actually on the bike, the cable will do this job. The rotor passes through this channel and it grabs onto the rotor to slow the bike down when the cable is pulled.
Let my past set on fire.
The idea is to lock the caliper in place such that the pads are totally parallel to the rotor. And I'm doing a friggin' terrible job. The pads only have about 1 millimeter of clearance on either side of the rotor, and if it's set up such that the pads touch at all, it's going to make a rubbing noise every time that the wheel turns.
Rotor trimming is about as unpleasant as I remember it. With disc trueness, no adjustment, no fine tuning. You just have to bend it into place.
Some fire left inside. Let my past set on fire.
Listen to this thing spin though. Huh? Huh? That only took me like a bajillion hours.
And pump the brakes, start today. Grieve the feeling, ride the wave. Can't erase all the pain. Rag the bleed and throw the weight. Pump the brakes. Pump the brakes.
Nice. I want to close out by talking about some of the things that I like about bicycle repair, or at least some of the first things that I can think of. Because I'm not really doing it to save time at all. I'm not even really doing it to save money. I think that it brings something personal that I'm not really sure how I could get otherwise. When I'm working on a bike, the things that I'm thinking of are questions that I probably would not be asking otherwise. Like, how is the bike designed and why is it designed this way? What does it mean for me to be working on it and improving it? Am I producing something or am I a consumer? The kind of natural extension is, does the labor theory of value have a convincing answer to the historical and contextual contingency of utility? These are things that I wouldn't really have a personal opinion on if I weren't the one working on the bike. one of the ways in which this has influenced me more personally, in a kind of profound way, I guess, is through a book that you've almost certainly heard me mention, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance from 1974 by Robert Pirsig, who I don't think it is at all a coincidence, talks a lot about aesthetics while talking about motorcycle repair. Now, my situation is clearly a little different, a little lighter, and much less expensive, but the thought process remains the same. I'm critical of some of the parts of his writing, but the kind of fundamental relationship between aesthetics and especially phenomenology from the perspective of a technician, I think is very powerful for me. And it's something that I think gives a sort of accent to the general satisfaction of working on the bike, improving it, seeing the whole thing get done. Of course, that's an important component to me. I want the bike to work well at the end of it. But seeing a kind of almost philosophical component to what I'm doing as a hobby really, of course, makes it a much more important part of my life than it would be if I were just mechanically doing the chores of fixing the bike. Maybe the second thing that I have thought about when it comes to bicycle repair is a sort of sense of empowerment, right? It is a real practical skill that I would need to pay for otherwise that I can provide for myself without having to go to a shop. The sort of sense of empowerment, I think, of fixing your own items and providing that one service for yourself among many others is a sort of challenge to the kind of consumer-only default of our sort of modern lifestyle. I would say that overall, working on the bike when you're in the apartment and everything is clean and dry and you have a very specific task to work on, you develop other secondary skills simultaneously. The general sort of sense of mechanical intuition for other consumer products that are made out of, bolts and steel. It allows you to think creatively. Once you've done it once, what else can I use these skills for? What else can I use these tools for? And that sort of feeling of independence from the bike shop, where I'm independent of them, does have a kind of personal value. That's a nice thought, but I don't totally buy it either. It comes back to this question of, to what degree am I a producer or a consumer in the moment that I'm working on the bicycle? I think that the brakes on this bike clearly work better today than they did a few days ago, but to what extent is that me putting my skills and time into it, and to what extent is that the time and skills of the guy that made those brake pads? I don't know how to make brake pads. I only know how to buy them. I need them given to me. This is just one single skill among a sort of supply chain of skills that need to be put together in order to finally have a functioning bicycle. And I really think that it's important to maintain a degree of modesty when thinking about what it is that I am doing in this job, in other jobs as well. I'm not just saying this so that I can insist on the fact that fixing just the brakes on a bike is not that important. I mean, you can probably get that yourself as a conclusion, but to say that this extends to other parts of my productive life, that really what I'm doing is only a step, regardless of how dressed up it is in the sort of aesthetics of mechanics, masculinity, productivity. Nothing is independent of the rest of the supply chain. You're never just a producer, you're always in conversation with, you're always dependent on others in that supply chain. This is a rather unstructured kind of outro. I'm not trying to make any huge point. This is clearly not an instructional video on how to repair your bike. I'm not trying to convince you of the labor theory of value or its extensions into phenomenology, nor to any particular interpretation of how value circulates throughout an economy. Instead, what I want to express is that doing stuff, working on a bike, putting in time and effort into this particular task comes out to being something much more than just the sum of its parts. It's not just knowledge of how the brakes and the shifters work and how the tires can come on and off, and something much deeper than that. I think that's true for a lot of hobbies, and I'm sure that you, the person watching this, do something as a hobby or even as a profession that requires a lot of time investment and energy just to get started or develop the skills, and it brings you some sort of pride or joy to do something which in isolation would be considered toil or would be considered labor. So if any of this resonated with you, I'd love to hear about it. I'd love to hear what it is that you're doing in your life that you're, to use an overused word, passionate about, that makes you reevaluate your relationship with the task at hand. It's just one of these things that I don't really know how to ask, even among my friends, hey, do you have anything going on in your life that makes you reevaluate your role as a subject with respect to objects or tasks in your life? It's just not something I get to share that much. People know that I work on bikes, but nobody really asks why. All right, sick. I'll see you on the road.